Tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozeman St. John host the incredible new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars.
I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, tonight on NBC.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Welcome to the Recruiting Book Club. I'm Carmen Hudson, recruiting consultant and former TA leader and book author. With each episode of this podcast, I have invited a guest who's written a book about recruiting, sourcing, or TA leadership. I like to read each book before the interview, and that makes our conversations rich and useful. And sometimes we veer off the topic of the actual book and we get into TA issues. So I hope that makes it interesting and useful to you. Please let me know what you think. Or if you have a favorite TA book, I'll add it to my list of folks to be interviewed. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Welcome to the Recruiting Book Podcast. My guest today is Cody Horton, and this is a special guest because Cody and I have known each other for a very long time. And I was responsible for hiring Cody into Microsoft for the second time. And as I understand your resume, you've been there 3 times, right?
Yeah, I've been. They're not gonna let me back in.
You never know. You never know. So I'm gonna just start by Cody having you introduce yourself, and then I'll talk a little bit about the book that you've written, and we'll jump in with some questions and get going.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be able to do this with you, Carmen. I mean, like I said, you hired me into Microsoft. The crazy thing about the Microsoft story is when I originally went to Microsoft, it was my first job outside the Navy, and I was a technical person. And while I was internal, I wanted to go into recruiting and leave the tech side, and I just couldn't do it. So I left to start my own diversity recruiting focused business. And so when we found each other, you were willing to say, probably somebody we could take a risk on. I remember the interviews. I remember coming in and how you helped me get ready for those interviews. And you're always my number one whenever I think about, hey, what really got me started in corporate recruiting? And that was really you that did that.
That's awesome news to hear. I'll tell you, I was fairly new to Microsoft at the time, and you were probably among one of my first hires at the time. And it was, for me, a slam dunk. I'm like, he knows Microsoft, he knows technology, recruiting stuff. He seems to have, you had some experience there. So I remember our leader at the time, I just kind of silver tongue talked her into, let's get this done right quick and in a hurry. And I felt like that was a win for me, a win for you, win for Microsoft. So, and since then, we've just had the great experience and pleasure of always just checking in, always keeping abreast of what the other is doing. So tell me a little bit more about your career post Microsoft.
So let me bring, I think it's important because this gets to why I even started doing this book. I grew up in a really small town in Texas. My parents didn't have any money to send me to college. I knew that they didn't have any great business contacts to connect me to anything. So I joined the Navy. And when I joined the Navy, I was fortunate that my recruiter was intentional about saying, hey, we've got this program for people of color, women, and people in rural communities to get them into the officer ranks of the Navy. I joined that. And if I fast forward, that changed my life because it allowed me to go get an undergrad, get a master's degree, get real world experience, spent 14 years in the Navy doing a variety of leadership and technical roles. Wow. And when I left the Navy, I got into the corporate world. And so when you and I connected, it was after my first stint as a technical support manager at Microsoft. And then I left, started a company, almost the same kind of company I have now. I didn't know anything, man. but I'm a risk taker. I want to try things, right? And so I do the Microsoft, and then I go to some other big companies like, Dell and Deloitte Consulting and Rackspace and Walmart and all those companies, and got a lot of experience in those companies on the talent acquisition side, both as a bag carrier and recruiter and as a talent acquisition leader. University recruiting, diversity recruiting has always kind of been my jam. When I left my last job at SunPower, I started a diversity recruiting business, and that was working top of the funnel using lots of different technology to help the clients find that diverse pool of talent so that they could truly have an inclusive slate of talent. I wrote my book, and then I started, doing more speaking and training, building some courses, online courses and things like that. So I've been an entrepreneur at heart for a very long time and doing this work.
What I want to do in this series is inspire people to think about crafting their careers and crafting them both within TA, but also outside of TA, and thinking about all the different things that we can do and all the different experiences that we bring to this. I would love to know, at what point did you really get interested in diversity? I sort of know you as a diversity recruiter from a long way back, but what really drove your interest in doing work in this realm?
That's a great question. What really made me do it, I think it goes back to when I was a child. I just kind of saw some of the disparities of the jobs that people were doing. And a lot of the people that looked like me weren't doing jobs that were, I guess they call them desk jobs now, or white collar jobs is what I called them at the time. They weren't doing those jobs. And my experience with the Navy and my Navy recruiter made me decide, hey, I want to do that for somebody someday. And, even when I was technical, I would always take the technical stuff I learned and train it and teach somebody else and try to make other people know that this is something you can do. And so I believe it's my personal mission is to try to empower people to change their lives. And I think the best way for me to do that is to connect great people to great opportunities that they might not know about. And so it's just been my mantra for a long time. Even before we met, it's been on my list of things that I wanted to do.
It's fantastic when you get to fulfill those dreams as well.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. The name of your book is called The Diversity Recruiting Blueprint. This is going to be a podcast, so people won't see me holding up the book, but I read it, and I actually have read it twice. So I've got probably more experience reading your book than you do.
Yes, you do.
I am very, very curious about where and how you sit on this question of DEI. The Diversity Recruiting Blueprint would give me, as a hiring manager or as a recruiter or a recruiting leader, sort of a how to do this and how to do this well and what to consider as I am bringing diverse candidates into my organization. But I want to start really simply by understanding your definition of DEI. I think that the definition might vary across different realms. And so I'd love to hear your definition. I'd love to hear if you think that it's controversial at all.
My definition, I'll give you the simple version. The D in diversity is about all of us. And that is why I oppose it when people say we're going to drop the D or we're going to hide the D in DEI, because the D is actually the thing that is about all of us. It's all the differences that we have, whether it's abilities, it's gender, it's age, it's you pick it. It's the way people think. That is, I think, so critical. And the E for me in DEI is that equity piece. And that's the other part. It's just about fairness. It's not equality. Equality is giving everybody the same thing and letting them go do it. Well, what if I need something else to be able to do my job to the best of my ability? And so the equity part is so critical. And I'll tell you, I've been pretty vocal about the whole SHRM dropping the equity thing from there. I know that's not what this podcast is about, but I want
to go directly in there. So that's fine.
So what they did with SHRM, the biggest HR organization on the planet, is they failed people because they decided not to focus on equity. And equity is the thing that people need to have a fair shot and a fair chance. And they're saying it's going to get lumped under inclusion. And I'm a big advocate of inclusion, but inclusion is bringing all the people that are there to the table. But if you get them to the table and they can't do what they need to do because they don't have the tools and the resources that they need, you just missed the boat. And so I think that dropping equity from their platform or trying to bury it under inclusion is just, political appeasement. And so that's probably why I don't have a big corporate job, because when it's a duck, I call it a duck, right? And that's how I think this is. But I think we need real talk on it.
I'm going to reframe your definition, and I'm going to say that what you're saying is diversity means that everyone shows up around the same work conference table, and they may come with different backgrounds, different physical appearance, et cetera, and that includes the diversity that is in the room, and that includes everyone, right? Everyone brings a unique way of being that includes their past and their present, right? And equity means that everyone has a set of tools to do the work. Some people may need additional tools or different tools or a way at looking how they do the work that needs to be done that may be slightly different, right? And inclusion means that all of these people are included in the decisions and the work that's being done. Yeah. So let me go back to the equity, please, because I just want to get into this conversation. I think I 100% agree with you, but there are companies who say, you know what? It is not our responsibility to give additional tools to those who don't have them.
Hey, everybody. Got a quick question for you. Is your job easy, stress-free, and full of rainbows and sunshine every single day? Yeah, I'd say that's a big fat no. Hi, I'm David Noe, host of Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners, and proud to be part of the Work-Defined community. Take a step down into my Speakeasy live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we tackle HR and business challenges through raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations. This is HR like you've never heard it before. Bold, real, and full of practical takeaways. Real guests, bold insights, authentic conversations that drive change. Catch every episode on demand through your favorite podcast platform or all the content at speakeasyhr.com.
Hey there, I'm Tim Boris, host of the Working Well podcast, where business strategy meets human sustainability. If you're an executive, a leader, or change maker ready to ditch burnout, build thriving teams, and drive real results, this is your next must listen. Tune in on the Work Defined Network or at timboris.com/podcast.
Yeah, that's an excuse, right? You give every employee the tools they need to do the job. Yeah, they may say that they don't need to give the people the tools, but they're missing out on people being able to do their best work. I think in order to do your best work, you need the tools to do the job. And if my job is to hammer a nail into a building and I have no hands, is there another tool that I could use that would allow me to help? Because you got to focus on what are they trying to accomplish? They're trying to get the building built, and the people that they have available to them need the tools to do that work. And when you don't give them those tools, they can't do the work. Nobody's happy. You're not happy. Your customers aren't happy. It's as much a business case for equity as much a business case as anything else, right? Because it's one thing to feel good, but you're not going to feel good for very long if you can't actually do your job. And so
That's it. All right. We may come back to that, but I just wanted to get a really clear understanding of your definition of these terms and really to dive into this issue, because I think equity is what is in question, and it's in question across different organizations, and how we actually set the stage for that is pretty clear. You talk about in your book tokenism, and I wanted to have a short conversation at least on that and what your definition of tokenism is. And I'd love to know if you've seen it play out in organizations. Have you seen tokenism exist?
I've been a token my whole career because I've been in the kind of jobs that are being an officer.
You and me both.
Being an officer in the Navy, there weren't many people like me. Being a technical manager at Microsoft, there were not many people like me. And sometimes people would have you get involved in things that they want to do it because they want someone who can relate to the population. For if you're going to see a group of African Americans in this case, that's what I identify as. I can't hide that. I walk into the room, there's no hiding. Right. And so I'm the one that's been out front and put out front to do the things that others aren't comfortable doing because they're going to relate, right? I think everybody kind of gets that. And I've seen that my entire career in just about every company that I've worked for. And so it's one of those things where you can wear your population out by always going to your one woman or your one African American or your one, you pick an identity. I don't know that people do it intentionally. I think it's an unintentional consequence of the way we define everyone and we look at everyone, right?
Right. So you think that tokenism exists because there are in places so few of us, and thus we find ourselves in organizations showing up as the token. I've had that happen to me in so many cases. It's interesting, though, the minute you start to speak the truth about tokenism, the reaction is a little bit different. There was a story that I have shared. I worked at a large retail organization. We'll just leave it there. And I was called into a room because they wanted more diverse leaders. And I pointed out, and they said, we just don't have any African Americans here who can move to diverse leaders. And I said, well, that is not what I see. They had handed out the metrics, and I sort of looked at it and I said, there's tons of diversity here. You have a huge retail organization and there's tons of diversity within that organization. What I don't see are people crossing the line from their retail jobs into other corporate and management jobs. And at that point, the papers were taken away from me and I was shuttled out of the room. But I see that so much. I would love to talk a little bit more about this idea that some organizations are really walking back from some of the efforts that they put into diversity and inclusion. I think since 2019, since George Floyd, since COVID, we've seen an additional effort put into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And even before that, there were organizations that were explicitly trying to increase their numbers. And I would say within the last year, we've heard more about organizations walking back from that. Places like Tesla and Zoom who are walking away from some of the commitments that they put in place. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and why you think this is and what do you think it will lead to and how do we even get here?
Yeah. One of the frustrations with the timing of my book getting published, my book was in production at the time that the Supreme Court made the decision to roll back affirmative action in higher education. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a chance to address that in my book. And so I wrote an article about it, but that decision and then the environment that's been created politically has caused companies to roll back. And then some of the lawsuits that are happening, companies are risk averse. And when it comes to litigation, if something's going to get a company into a litigious situation, they back away, right? They tend to pull it back. But what I'm seeing is the majority of companies that have committed to do the work are still working on doing the work. They're just reframing how they talk about it and how publicly they talk about it. I think everyone got excited about trying to do something about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work after George Floyd. But after all these lawsuits started to happen and all the angst that's been out there in the market, they've gotten very cautious and very conservative because most of these companies, especially the big ones, are conservative. Unless you're the ice cream company that that will go unnamed right here. They're out front. They're waving the flag. They're doing all kinds of stuff, right? But most companies aren't. And what I'm seeing other companies do is take a different approach. And I'll tell you, we've approached the diversity work in an incomplete way. And this is why I say that. We have left out a particular population, left them out of the conversation in a way that even I didn't address in my book the right way. I sat on a plane on my way to Nashville to be on a panel to specifically talk about the Supreme Court thing. When I got on the plane, a lady sat next to me. She says, I'm going to a Christian conference. I asked her, why are you going to Nashville? She said, I'm going to a Christian conference on women's reproduction. And I thought, okay, my bias kicks in. I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. Because I was going to Nashville to talk about affirmative action. I said, I hope she doesn't ask me. So she asked me why I was going. I told her the reason I'm going is because I'm going to do this talk on affirmative action and the Supreme Court impact and how people need to address their diversity, equity, and inclusion recruiting efforts. To my surprise, she said, I wish I could be at your talk. My husband and I are two white people from the Midwest and Texas. We adopted our son, who's 17 now, from Nigeria 17 years ago, and we can no longer walk into a restaurant or our church or anywhere else without people turning their head. And it just made me check my own bias and realize we've left people out of the conversation. And if people don't see themselves in the story, they don't want to play. So that's why there's all this pushback on DEI efforts, because a particular group feels like they've been left out of the story, right? It's just evolved the way I kind of think about doing the work that I'm doing and how I might adjust some of my language when I do the work.
Very cool. So we've got these companies, they're increasingly conservative, yet the population is shifting and they're going to want to appeal to a broader, more diverse number of folks who are going to be increasingly diverse to meet their employment needs. That's my guess, unless AI takes over all of that, but that's a whole other topic. We won't go there right now.
Don't even get me started on AI. I'll be all over the AI thing.
I'm just wondering, in this quest to be more conservative, will they lose out eventually? I work with a company, and they are a consumer products company, and so they're being much more forward about their need for diversity and how this impacts their sales. I'm wondering about companies for whom that need is not so obvious, whether or not they will see this play out at some point.
Yeah, the smart companies are still trying to do the work, right? They're just trying to buy time to get through the environment that exists today. They're trying to buy time, but they're still trying to do the work because they've already looked at the numbers and they're like, we need these consumers, and our consumer base is expanding. Especially you take retail, the people who buy things, it's a really diverse group of people. And every year you've got more and more of those people in the market as customers. So even the companies that have said, we're conservative about this, we're approaching this conservatively, but we need to do this work. So I think most of these companies are just moving forward, relabeling things, they're changing things. They're not out there waving their arms and saying, we're doing this, but they're quietly continuing to do the work. And if you just look at what they're attempting, the story comes out. Now, we haven't done it very well over the years, but we're continuing. I think the efforts are still continuing. I think companies are still trying to do that work and trying to figure it out.
What's your advice to recruiters in these organizations that are, on one hand, not broadcasting what their efforts are, and the recruiters who are on the ground talking to candidates who want to know, hey, what's going on? How do you advise recruiters to work through this?
I advise recruiters and anyone, I said, always stay curious, right? And the biggest thing you can do is to be intentional. Be intentional about your learning, be intentional about relationships, find those, what I call umbrella organizations, where they have all this diverse talent that exists, and build those relationships, because people buy from the people that they know, like, and trust. And my advice to recruiters is lean into the work, learn how do you create a more inclusive and a more diverse group of talent, or build more inclusive talent pools so that you're out there, right? And they know you and they like you, they trust you, they understand your brand, and just keep building relationships, keep networking, and always be sourcing, right? Always be looking for things, finding those organizations, expanding your knowledge. And sometimes you have to go slower to go faster. I teach this course and I tell them, go slower to go faster. And what I mean by that is, in order to have a truly inclusive sourcing strategy, you need to fish in all the pools. It takes longer, it's going to go slower, but if you do it that way, you're going to have a more holistic sourcing strategy and not just this speed to hire kind of strategy. You're going to include more people in the process because you're fishing in all the pools, and it's part of your comprehensive strategy to fish in all the pools. So it's not wrong to say, I'm going to build relationships with Hispanic serving institutions or women organizations or HBCUs. That's okay. That's just one part of your overall sourcing strategy. So my advice to recruiters is to learn those organizations, is to learn how to build those relationships and stay in the game, stay engaged, and keep learning, and learn how to use AI to make that better.
So I was hosting Talent 42 a few years ago, and we had a leader from a local company here, Expedia, and she talked about their desire to hire a more diverse pool of technical talent as part of her work. And she said they had to slow down, and things slowed down as they learned how to do that, how to exercise that muscle, how to get to diverse candidates and build wider candidate pools. She said it slowed them down for a while. And then once they had developed that muscle, the speed came right back to what they were doing.
Yes.
So it's a matter of slowing down for a bit and then moving forward.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about values, mission, and culture fit, and you talk about it through the lens of diversity. I'd love to have you describe that, because I actually read that through a couple of times just to understand, and coming from my background where we consult on this as well, I'd love to hear your thought about the values of a company, the mission of a company, and this idea of culture fit, and looking at that through the lens of diversity.
Yeah, and I hope I said culture match in there. I might be, when it got printed said fit, but I hate the word fit, And
well, so, you talk about that. You actually you talk about that. Yes, you got to read your own book.
Yeah, exactly. And so the reason I talk about values is you want to look at the values that your company has and the behaviors that you're looking for in your company. So if you want people who take initiative, who know how to study, who know how to communicate, look at those soft skills, right? That's the part that's really critical, is look at those things. And then what is your mission of your company? What are you trying to accomplish as a company, right? Is this person going to be able to contribute? And do they even care about being part of that mission, right? And these are very subjective. They're not hard things to look at, right? You're going to look and you're going to say, this is the definition of our values. Here are the values that we have. But you always, when I say culture match, and really it's a culture add, when you look at someone that you're trying to see, hey, is this a person that is matched to what we currently think is our culture, but we're keeping our eyes open in case there's something they're bringing to our culture that we didn't have, and we didn't even know we had it. We were missing it because we didn't ever see it. And so spend time on those versus trying to fit someone into a number of years experience, or replace, Bob Smith did this job for 15 years. We're trying to read somebody just like Bob Smith. Is that really what you need? But are you just looking at the values that you respect in your company, or you expect in your company, or the competencies, which are skills related, and don't give a long list of 15 of those things, right? Narrow it down to where you need to, And so that's kind of what I'm talking about when I get to that point.
That's it. It's this idea that culture fit. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it developed such a standardized place in what it is that we look for, but it makes very little sense. I think looking for skills, looking for the competencies, or the alignment with your vision or your mission, looking for experiences that match what you might add, and also looking at whether or not a candidate is going to thrive and enjoy this environment. Those are sort of the 4 areas where I would place emphasis. And, that came from many years, of course, working at Recruiting Toolbox and really thinking deeply about this. And this idea that culture fit is part of it. I think at some point we're just all going to have to toss that right out the window.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, I get itchy when I think about culture fit, and I don't know if they let me leave it in the book, because I always had this phrase I use as like, culture fit will kill your inclusion hiring efforts, right? They're like, you can't kill, you need to use something else like hamper or delay, and that might be what I put in the book. I don't remember. I have to actually read the darn book and see. So
read your book. It's good. It's good. Sort of diving down into the weeds a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts on, you talk about interviewer capability and you talk about preparing managers for interviewing and recruiters interviewing. Do you think that many corporate managers, or recruiters for that fact, are good at interviewing?
I don't think we're good at interviewing, right? Because we love that special question that we always ask. It's a puzzle. Whatever reason we're thinking about using it, right? I'm a big believer in standardized interviews, behavior-based interviews, which is all about, what was the person's actions, or competency-based interviews, which sound like behavior-based interviews, but they're not. They're focused on the skills and the knowledge and the ability. So even the competencies are really powerful. And then with the interviews, people don't always ask the same questions to every candidate.
That is the worst thing in the world, if you ask me.
So no, that's a long answer to your thing. I mean, I'm writing a book on this. I got a course that I deliver. It's inclusive interviewing with bias mitigation, because you have to you can't just do an unconscious bias training. You need to pull it in and make it something that people actually use, so that they actually are in a position to really impact things, right? And so it's one of those things.
I can't tell you the number of managers who are so wedded to these questions that they've asked for so many years, many of which have nothing to do with the job that the person would be performing. And so forcing managers in training to get them to think about, let's develop some questions based on the skills and the competencies that you need, but also based on the experiences that they might have when they're in your organization. And they get to work, and this is like a difficult challenge for them. But eventually they get it. But my goodness, I have no idea what they've been asking beforehand. And I'm a little afraid to find out.
Well, you're spot on, Carmen. Interviewers don't always prepare. They don't leave enough time for the interview. There's also that unexpected question that should be expected by every interviewer. Candidates are interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So they're going to always ask you certain questions. And I think we don't do a great job of selling the candidate on the opportunity, the company, and the role, selling the candidate on our team. We don't do a great job of preparing for those basic questions like, why'd you come to work here? What keeps you here? Is there opportunity for career growth, right? Candidates ask those questions all the time, and it impacts your candidate experience. So,
do you think the questions change, or do interviewers slightly change their interviews when the candidate is a diverse candidate, or if the candidate is unfamiliar to them?
Because of bias and people's uncomfortableness in specific situations, I think the questions will get adjusted in some ways. Take the affinity bias, where it's like me. Oh, I like you. You're like me. We went to the same school. My questions are going to end up being differently if I'm not following a structured plan. If it's someone I'm not very comfortable with, I walk in, I got, crazy hair, crazy tattoos, all that stuff. Everyone in the office is all dressed up and looking nice. There is a bias that's going to kick in, and they're going to ask, or you got the same, this is my favorites, you got the same last name as my ex. I got an issue with you already. And my questions are going to be different. It's going to
right.
So I do. That's a long answer to your short question, but I do think they change if you're not intentional about mitigating for that bias.
All right. We are already close to at time. I have a couple more questions for you that I threw one in. This was for myself here. So I did an experiment when I worked for a large coffee retailer here in Seattle. And I just submitted to my hiring managers. They were having difficulty making selection of women. And so I just started sending them only women candidates. I did this for a few months. And lo and behold, they hired women candidates. Was that wrong?
So I literally just had someone ask me this question. They said, "Hey, I was looking at your book and I did this." And my answer was, it's not wrong to fish for women in the pools where women exist. You need to make sure that you are being inclusive in the fishing effort, right? Making sure you're looking in all the places. And so today, I would say you can't say that out loud. And it's one of those practices that you got to fish in all the pools, and you got to try to get an inclusive, diverse and inclusive slate so that the best candidate wins. Now, the data says if you've got more women or more people of color or marginalized communities in the process, you almost have to have that in order for someone to have a chance to get hired because of all the other things that happen in the interview process.
I had heard that if you have a broader set of women as the candidate pool, that you have a lot higher likelihood of having a woman chosen versus having one woman and all other genders or all other males as part of the candidate pool. Then you're going to have a little bit of trouble. I will tell you that I tried the same experiment with African American candidates, and it did not work as well. And managers noticed, and I got called out, and it was an interesting experiment. But I just wanted to get your thoughts. So you would not do that currently?
Yeah, I would not do that. I would give them plenty of candidates though, so that I did get all those demographics in there. Right. It's one of those. There's the reality of if you give them all that. So if you gave all African Americans, they're definitely going to notice it, right? Because something's different.
They noticed.
Yeah. And so, you could give all, like you said, you gave all women. Well, if they're all similar in background and identity, nobody's going to. They
were all highly qualified, and it didn't mean that I was not ever going to serve them male candidates. I just thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to force a decision in this way. I never felt that it was 100% a legal way of recruiting, but it did achieve what I wanted to achieve at that time. So we have a few minutes left. So I'd love to hear about ERGs, and you write about ERGs in your book. I want to hear a little bit more about how do you select a leader or a champion for your ERGs. And I want to hear a little bit more. I've heard of some organizations that are actually paying people to participate in ERGs. So employee resource groups. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the ERGs, and there's some people who are so well versed in ERGs. I used a lot of their material when I was doing research. But the ERGs those employee resource groups can be so powerful in helping, because usually the leaders are going to be people who are passionate about doing this work. They want to do a great job. They can relate to the groups that you're trying to connect with, and they can rally other people in your organization to be part of the teams that actually go out, right? What I call the engagement teams, where they go out, they're on campus, or they're at an event, or they're somewhere like that, and they're tied back to the business, right? The leader of the ERG should be a person who's coming from the business. They understand the big business acumen, and they understand how do you break down silos, because they've got to communicate across all the ERGs as well as across multiple divisions. ERGs can be a gold mine. I do believe that the ERG champion, if they're doing the job that the way it's designed, there should be compensation for that person, because it can be a part-time job, if not a full-time job in doing that work. And there's a lot of pressure on your ERGs, right? You don't want to have your ERG always go to that ERG for things. So you can burn your ERGs out, because they're all volunteers. And so I think you should fund those ERGs and pick people, champions, and not let just anybody be a champion of your ERGs.
That's awesome. I'm going to end us here. Otherwise, we're going to go for another hour, and my podcast host will get me in trouble. So I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to reserve the right to come back to you and have another conversation with you about this book, about your new book. I will definitely share on our website how to reach you and how to get a hold of your book. I'd love to have you spend the last few minutes just talking about what's most important to you now, And I know that you're a consultant. What kinds of clients are you looking for?
What's most important to me is to really be able to empower people to change their lives, right? By connecting them to great opportunities. And the way I work with the companies I'm working with, I mostly work with companies, is to help them with planning for how can I do this diversity and inclusion work. And right now, I'm right in the middle of the crosshairs between DEI for talent acquisition and AI, right? Two hot button topics. I'm right in the middle of them. I'm working on them. I'm talking about them. I'm creating courses on them all the time. And I think if I could have anyone take away something that they should go do today, it would be to stay curious, jump on the AI. I won't even call it a bandwagon. It's a train. Jump on the train and start to figure out how to apply AI in your work around talent acquisition specifically, because we need people who know how to deal with it to be able to put the safeguards in place. And you got to understand it if you can't do it. And so I'll get off my AI soapbox, but just doing meaningful things that change companies and change people's lives is what I want to do.
I love it. I love it. You have a website?
I do. It's CodyLHorton.com.
Awesome. We'll put that up. And I really appreciate your spending the time with me. Thank you for writing the book. Good luck on your next book. We'll have you on again. And I appreciate the conversation. Always appreciate spending time with you, Cody.
Yeah, thanks, Carmen. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.